The way that we store our memories when we are going through our day-to-day life is very different to how memories get stored during traumatic episodes. And that's the key. That is what people sometimes don't understand. I know I didn't understand that. That's why I went on and wrote a book about it, because I knew if I was not the only person that couldn't believe what had happened to me and that I couldn't remember it. So when you're going through a traumatic episode, the fear center in your brain takes over the brain. So in essence, it shuts down your rational brain. It shuts down your memory center. So the traumatic experience gets stored with emotions. Like your emotional brain is the one that is receiving, all of these traumatic memories and gets them like stored in your body. Your body is like a library. So these memories get stored in your body. And the important part of it is that because they don't get processed, either because you're too afraid, you're too little, you feel helpless, it's just overwhelming. Usually when it happens during childhood, they don't get processed. So the emotions get stored and stuck in your body. And those emotions that get stuck in different areas develop into illnesses later on.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about healing from childhood abuse and uncovering repressed memories. I'm delighted to welcome Melissa Osorio. Melissa is a best-selling author, speaker, and mental health ambassador. You can reach Melissa at her website at melissaasorio.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Melissa. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It is such a privilege to be able to meet with you. And I just finished reading your book, and I thought it was amazing. And I would like to recommend it to anyone who's listening, for I think it is a benefit to anyone who's had the experience of experiencing that childhood abuse, that trauma, and having those memories be hidden, and understanding the process of being able to recover them. And I also think that it is an incredible benefit to people who have not had that experience, but have friends or loved ones or family members who have, so that they can understand what is going on. Because it is very hard to believe for some people that you can go through such horrible experiences and have it hidden from you. It's almost like you have two completely different stories of your life. So one of your chapters, you explained the difference between just a normal memory that you've forgotten because it's in the past, versus what happens in the brain when we experience trauma. And would you mind explaining, so that people who have never heard of this before can know what it is we're talking about?
Yeah, so before I dive into that one, and it ties in with this, the book is also written for those people that don't remember their childhood. So they have no clue maybe what happened there. And the people that also just display behaviors and emotions they cannot explain. And also the people that have any sort of physical ailments that have no explanation, like autoimmune diseases, chronic digestive symptoms. Why? Because these are pointing to something. Then to connect it with your question, the way that we store our memories when we are going through our day-to-day life is very different to how memories get stored during traumatic episodes. And that's the key. That is what people sometimes don't understand. I know I didn't understand that. That's why I went on and wrote a book about it, because I knew if I was not the only person that couldn't believe what had happened to me and that I couldn't remember it. So when you're going through a traumatic episode, the fear center in your brain takes over the brain. So in essence, it shuts down your rational brain. It shuts down your memory center. So the traumatic experience gets stored with emotions. Like your emotional brain is the one that is receiving, all of these traumatic memories and gets them like stored in your body. Your body is like a library. So these memories get stored in your body. And the important part of it is that because they don't get processed, either because you're too afraid, you're too little, you feel helpless. It's just overwhelming, usually when it happens during childhood. They don't get processed, so the emotions get stored and stuck in your body. And those emotions that get stuck in different areas develop into illnesses later on.
And that is absolutely true. I mean, this didn't used to be understood in the past, but I
Mhm.
think with The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, he helped to make things mainstream. And then since that time, there have been so many other research and studies that have proven, and even the CDC says, 90% of the ailments that we go to the doctor for are related to our stress, they're related to our emotions. And then Harvard did another study where they said, well, let's do our research and see what we find. And they found their numbers were anywhere between 60 to 90% of the ailments are physical ailments. The things that we go to a doctor for are based in stress. They're based in our emotions. And as you mentioned, these can actually be hidden from us. And so I love that you brought up, and I appreciate that people who are struggling with some kind of physical ailment where you go to the doctor and you're doing your tests, you're doing everything you can, and you're not finding any answers. It might lead to maybe there's something in your past that has not been processed, that perhaps if you can uncover it and let it go, then the physical ailments will be able to heal as well. So, as we've been talking about this, is it okay if just briefly let's hear some of your two stories, like the story you thought until you were 36, and then the story that you uncovered?
Yeah, so my story that I thought was my only story, started with birth, and I grew up in a household with many siblings. My eldest brother died. I believe I wasn't affected by it because I was so little. My father was my hero. I was spending more time with him than with my mom by far, more time with him than any of my siblings had ever spent. I became really, really a great student and very good at business with him, learning with him because I wanted to be with him. I wanted him to be proud of me, right? And then on the other side, my mom was very religious, so I was also very religious and active in our home religion because I wanted my mom to also, love me, and that was important to her. Then my father gets murdered when I'm 16, and my world shatters. Like the world I knew up to that point really, really shatters. And in one day, I lose my father, who was also my only friend. And it was difficult for me as a teenager at that point. I packed up bags, moved to the US. Um, the story continues. I had to find a visa, so I get businesses, and I'm learning all of these and just basically trying to survive. During that time, I developed bulimia. I'm deeply unhappy. I was having a bad relationship with my family. Didn't really like people. Was very isolated. Then at 25, I get married, and my ex-husband has the cutest little boy. He's 4 years old, and I could not love that child. I mean, he entered through one room, I left through the other. It made me feel very inadequate as a woman, as a partner. Plus, my marriage was really problematic. So it was not, a space where we could be loving and growing and respectful. It was just the complete opposite. I get divorced, and then life didn't get better, which was interesting because I thought, it will get better after my divorce, but life didn't get better. Like I was repeating the same cycles with, men in my life, and I was just unhappy, develop an unhealthy relationship with wine. So I was drinking lots and lots of wine every day and just wallowing in my misery. And that is story number one, right? Just a constant strive to be successful, to look pretty, to, fit in society, to have the life that we all want, and just not really being able to feel happy, even when I had some of those things happen. So the other story, the one that I discovered when I finally reached rock bottom or close to it and flew to Costa Rica, and I went to a center, which I'm here right now, actually. I'm actually working in this center right now. So I flew to a center where they served ayahuasca medicine, which I had heard from some friends it was beneficial, and I was desperate. So I came to something unknown. And on my third ceremony here, on my third treatment, then my life that I just described, the one I thought I had lived, the Melissa that I thought I was, collapsed in an instant, in an instant, because in that moment, I started to remember my childhood, which, by the way, I didn't remember before. So this is also people, I've met so many people since that I said, no, I didn't remember my childhood. They're like, oh man, I don't remember my childhood. And we don't know what that means, right? And I don't want to scare people. Like, it doesn't mean that something like my childhood happened to you, but it just means that there was something there that was overwhelming enough for you to have your brain do what it's supposed to do, which is protect you from the overwhelm by shutting down the memories. Okay. So then that second reality was extremely traumatic. Many years of extreme betrayal and abuse. And as a child, I obviously wasn't able to cope with what was happening. So the brain, as I mentioned, my brain just protected me from those memories.
You handled that so beautifully and so gently that there's so much that went on. And before we get into the whole thing, it's interesting that there are some traumas that we can experience, like your brother died when you were very, very young. And that's a trauma. And yet that was something that you remembered. Everyone experienced it together, and it was hard, but we all experienced it together. Also, having your father be murdered when you're 16 years old, that is not normal. That is a huge trauma. But again, it's not something that you forgot. It's not something that was repressed. This was a shared experience with the rest of your family. It was hard, but you were allowed to have that experience openly with other people. But the part that you very gently covered was that your father began sexually abusing you when you were 3 years old. And when we talk about the different stories, one story is so much more pleasant than another. And in one story, the pleasant version is when you were a teenager, you're 15 years old, and your father noticed that you were gaining a little weight. And, he was concerned about you. So, a loving father, he took you just one on one on a trip to New York, and it solved the problem. You came back, the extra weight was gone, and, everything is back to normal. That's a lovely story. But the reality of that story is that you were pregnant, carrying your father's child, and he forced you to have an abortion, and you lost that child. And this experience, which is so huge and so traumatic, was not something that you could share. You had to carry it by yourself. And that was one of the memories that was not in early childhood, but in your teen years, that was still, your brain said, shut that one down, get rid of that. That didn't happen. I really appreciate it as you're talking about your awakening and recognizing the real story, that you likened it into the Matrix about how Neo took the red pill. And you talked about that choice of when you become aware of the rest, it's hard. Would you mind kind of sharing just a little bit about making that choice to awaken the reality and how hard that was, or what process that took?
Yeah, it was horrifying. It was heartbreaking. It was any word that you can think of to think of a moment that is just shattering. It was all that all at the same time. I know you've heard probably, and the listeners have heard of the Stockholm syndrome. This happens to adults. And imagine a child that all I knew was abuse from my father. That was all I knew. And it was, adults that are abusing children, they know how to manipulate their minds. So they go into love and pain, love and pain. So that is how they really gain the child's memories and trust and power. They take the power away. So my father was my hero up until that night in Costa Rica. He was God to me. When he died, he was placed in an emotional pedestal, by my brain, by myself, by the Stockholm syndrome that I had embraced without wanting to embrace it. It was just the way that our brain works. So in that evening, when I started to remember, it was so sudden. There was just an image that flashed in front of my eyes. But, I describe it in the book and I describe it in this way. In that instant, every cell in my body carried the weight of remembrance. Every cell of my body knew the whole story. It was like one of those aha moments when we get something and we really get it like a gut level. It was like that. So in that instant, I fought. I fought a lot. I fought for like 2 hours, fighting with my mattress where I was laying down and screaming and just crying. It was like an internal war. But this is something that was life-changing. And this is the moment that you're referring to, which is often what here at Rhythmia, we're always teaching, go towards what's hard, right? So in that moment, I had a choice. Like we all have choices in life to either go towards what's difficult or go towards an easy life that eventually ends up being not such a great life. So in that evening, when I started to recover my memories, I chose to go towards what was hard. I chose to remember. I chose to not resist anymore. So in that instant, then with the help of ayahuasca medicine, your brain is actually able to access memories more easily and in a safer state. So in that moment of decision, I remember I slapped my mattress once and I said, show me, I want to know. And that instant, that decision changed my life because I could have stayed stuck in a state of denial and victimhood. And a lot of people do this, and it's really hard to grow when you're in that state. So I'm always encouraging people to go towards what's hard, and on the other side is a better life.
And that's important. It's important to recognize that there's something better on the other side. So is it okay? We talked a little bit about this pinnacle of change from an old life, an old story, an old version of what happened. And then you get to the other part and it's hard. And the story is horrible, horrible beyond belief. But I don't want that to be my final story. And I know that that's not what you wanted as your final story, and that's not your final story. Would you mind giving anybody who is in this experience at any point in time what kinds of wonderful things they have to look forward to after you awaken and then process these hidden memories?
Yeah, so it's hard to see the light when you're in the tunnel of darkness. And it's even harder to even believe there is a light when you don't even know you're in a tunnel. So when you don't remember traumatic experiences, it's like you're trying to heal a wound you don't know you have, which is very, very difficult. You're throwing darts and missing the bullseye constantly in your life. So many people will continue to live a life of unremembered trauma and they will get right to their graves and always question why they couldn't be happy. I encourage listeners and people that have emotions they cannot explain, behaviors they cannot change, to really dive a little deeper because often they're stemming from things in our childhood that we haven't processed. And the thing is that if you choose to look into your childhood and to heal from traumatic memories, you're going to have a period of pain and a period of discomfort, but you're going to know what your wound is. And awareness, just being aware, it starts changing everything. So just knowing what happened to you, it gives you a lot of compassion. It gives you a lot of grace for yourself and for those around you. And as a result, you will start seeing yourself and life differently. So instead of going through life like a zombie, you're actually going to be able to start knowing yourself and start healing your heart and having a fuller life. Many people that have gone through traumas are disconnected from their emotions. And to live a life where you don't feel real emotions like love and joy and sadness and grief, because we're here to feel all emotions, right? Not only the pretty ones, but also the more difficult ones. To live a life without being connected to yourself and others is a very incomplete life. So by going through processes of healing trauma, you're able to become more whole and you're able to live a fuller life. So definitely on the other side, and by the way, I'm still working on myself and more memories are still coming up. And the road to recovery is a long road. But when you're starting to see the light and you're coming out of the tunnel of trauma and difficulties, there is something just magical that starts to happen, and you just start becoming excited and more alive from the inside out, which is really hard to describe for someone that has never felt that way. And all my life, I lived in a very shut down state. But on the other side, there is a lot more aliveness and hope.
That matters. And I appreciate that you shared that it can take a while, but the light and the hope, it's worth it. And I imagine it's getting easier as a new memory comes. Now it's not as hard to process and work through it. You can move faster once that initial horrifying opening of the door took place.
That is correct. Yeah, yeah. So I mentioned I am working here at Rhythmia, and I was also receiving in a treatment, and I did have just that last week. I did have, another memory come up that was it alone is pretty horrifying. But now I have the tools, the emotional tools, and the compassion and the resilience to be able to process them and know that they're not part of me anymore. They're not who I am. I am not a victim anymore. I am not restrained anymore by any sort of, person or activity. I am a free woman with a free choice, and having that freedom comes through with healing.
Freedom. That's what's on the other side of this. Freedom and peace and an identity. That I love that you said that these things that happen to you are not you. Now you're free to be the real you. So who is the real Melissa? What are you like?
Well, I got to know myself also in the last 3 years. So it's kind of fun to rebuild yourself. And the essence of who I am really is someone that is extremely grateful for every aspect of my life. Even the very, very difficult times. I was talking to my mom recently and I said, Mom, I've had a marvelous life. And she said, Really? I mean, even with everything that happened. And I said, Mom, it has been marvelous because of everything that happened. Because everything that we go through, we can see it one of two ways. We can see it as a punishment of why did this happen to me and let it define you, or we can see it as a gift, even the most difficult ones, uh, as a gift that allows to become who we're meant to be. And hardship is usually something that forges people in those two ways, either someone that's gonna be a victim or someone that's going to repeat harm or someone that's going to come out on the other side and help others and use their experience to be a light, the light they wish they had. So I'm very happy because now I've really become the person that I wish I had when I was a kid around me, to guide me, to help me, to be alert about what's happening in the environment, be looking out for children, giving people hope. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing to heal your heart and then to be able to share that healing with whoever needs it.
And that's what you have done, and that's what you're doing, is you are now a light. Whereas at one time you were a victim, but now you are a champion. And you are the champion of your story. You are the hero, and you're winning. And because you've gone through such horrible things, it's like you are the greatest champion. It seems like the harder things that we go through, the stronger and better we can become. We don't necessarily become, but that's something that you have done. Now, you mentioned your mom, and she was not aware of any of the abuse. When you were able to share that with her, how did she respond to that?
Um, everything kind of made sense for my family immediately. There was really not a moment of doubt about what I was saying. Like, when something is hidden in plain sight, but it's something that you will never imagine or could imagine because it's just not who you are, but it's right there. And all you do is just shine a little light on it and it becomes clear. So nobody ever doubted what I was talking about, especially because, there was an element of abuse for one of my other siblings too that came to light afterwards. Not to the same degree, but let's say that it started a little bit with another sibling, and then I came, and it was a much easier situation for the abuse to really escalate to how it did because of the circumstances that were in my house, with my brother dying, with my mom away in the United States taking care of him at that time. So my mom really felt, as any mother would, a lot of guilt that she struggled with for a while. She's doing better now. But the guilt is a very difficult thing for parents to endure when one of their childs under their watch suffers hardship that the parent, the mom or the dad didn't see. They weren't there. So she's been having a hard time, but she also, understands that it's difficult for a parent to imagine that the other parent will be doing something like that to their child. It's not a natural first thought. So there is a lot of grace that I've given to my mom and a lot of grace that she's giving herself, over this matter.
I am so grateful that they believed you from the beginning because that is not always the case. And I am grateful for you extending that grace and that understanding to your mother. And I understand the way that she feels to an extent because we have a situation as well where there's one story and then you find out 20 years later that there's another story. I have a beautiful daughter. I did my best to protect my kids, to love them, to, take care of them. And I thought they had a great childhood. But I learned later when my children were adults that one of them had been abused by an uncle for a period of 2 years. And it was so horrific, so traumatic, so confusing that she, just like you, those memories were hidden. She never talked, she never said anything, and she couldn't because she didn't remember that it happened. But as you mentioned with your situation, how when you said something, people said, oh, well, that fits this and this and this. It was the same with us. Once the story was brought out, it was, oh, well, that makes sense about this and this and this behavior from the other person that I could not explain. It was just odd. I didn't expect anything like sexual abuse. That was beyond anything that I could even imagine doing to a child. But after it just, oh, I see, I see, and it is horrifying from the point of a parent to recognize that something so horrible could take place, and I did not prevent it because I didn't know. And it hurts. And it still hurts.
Is is the difficulty of the parent to be able to even imagine other people around to do something like this to a child. Like even I question if I will have had children, how alert will I have been? So now at this point, what you're doing is beautiful because you experience this firsthand, and now you're able to bring more awareness for other people, other parents that are suffering under similar circumstances, or for parents that are not even putting two and two together to, hey, this is extremely common. Childhood sexual abuse is a silent epidemic that is destroying humanity because it destroys people at their foundation. Be alert. So now you're doing your part. This happened in your family, and instead of wallowing in it and feeling, like you failed, what you're doing is you're actually helping others by bringing awareness right now.
And I'm grateful for your healing and your example. And it gives me hope for healing for my daughter who is still in the process. Because as you mentioned, it takes a while. And as we talk about childhood sexual abuse and how incredibly common it is, and how incredibly damaging it is, that it damages the core, the identity of a human being. And it creates problems that last a lifetime or until they figure it out and work through it.
That is exactly right. Yeah. It's one of the most devastating things that a human can undergo. However, when you're able to heal it and heal the consequences of it, it's really something that will make you very resilient. Because like every trauma, we always hear about trauma that it breaks people. However, there is another aspect of trauma that I often point to, and I call it post-traumatic growth. Is the growth that happens if you work through traumas and through emotions and you come out on the other side stronger, more resilient, more compassionate, more courageous, and able to help other people. So this is a post-traumatic growth that we can achieve when we do the work, but it doesn't come easily, right? So it requires work.
Thank you. And I appreciate you mentioning that because we talked before about if you're going to take the red pill, if you're going to face this, is there something better on the other side? And the answer is yes. Yes. And a person who goes through horrible things is not doomed to a life of misery. And we talked about some of those physical ailments. We can also have mental, emotional, we can have struggles in our relationships. We can have all of those things. But that doesn't need to be the end story. There is
Correct.
something better that is possible. In fact, you described that you had a marvelous life. And that's a beautiful word, not just an okay life, a marvelous life. Because now you have that opportunity for that post-traumatic growth. And you have learned to love and embrace yourself and to be able to know that you are, you're worthy of love and that you are just a glorious being that's here on this earth to share light and to do good things. So I appreciate who you are. I appreciate your example. I appreciate what you have done. And I appreciate that you have held up and are holding up the light so that other people can work their way through and have a beautiful experience on the other side. So that regardless of what they've gone through, they can say, I had and I'm having a marvelous life.
Thank you so much. Beautiful words. I take them to heart. They make my heart smile.
Is there anything else you want to make sure we cover before we close today?
No, I think, I always like to reiterate what you mentioned. Traumatic experiences that we go through childhood, they absolutely don't have to define us. We can shine light into them and really redefine ourselves. So I invite people to do that. And, if they're in need of guidance or has some questions, the book really is like a guide to help people move through traumatic experiences. They can reach out to me on Instagram. Maybe you will put the link, below as well for the Instagram. And I'm here to help. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation.
Mm. Thank you, Melissa. This has been an absolute privilege to be with you today.
Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by author Renee Fredrickson. She said, "Some of your childhood traumas may be remembered with incredible clarity, while others are so frightening or incomprehensible that your conscious mind buries the memory in your unconscious. For any of our listeners who have experienced repressed memories, please know that you're not alone, you're not crazy, and there is hope for healing." See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for tuning in to Linda's Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends to help us inspire even more listeners. Be sure to visit hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free and affordable resources to help you overcome life's challenges. And explore healingbreathworkdetox.com, where you'll find transformative tools for deep inner healing and lasting change. Also, don't forget to check out my books, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. Your journey to hope, healing, and happiness starts here.